Hey there, it's day 14 of my journey towards writing my first fantasy novel. And I'm going to keep this short because it's really late. It's 10:30 p.m. I've been sitting here writing for about an hour. I was super busy for the rest of the day. And what I did today was super helpful in a sense that I've been sharing with you over the past 2 weeks all these different story ideas, and it started to change and evolve over time. I've also received quite a bit of feedback from a number of you, including some great information about the medieval times in Ireland and lots of suggestions. And also, some of you have proposed that they join my street team and help me to develop the novel by reading what I write and giving advice. So I'm super, 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 super grateful for that, and I will get in touch as soon as I have a little bit of time to set this up. But what I did today was I took all these different story elements and then I organized them in one document. And I started with, first of all, the most important thing for me was to get more clarity about the sequence of events. What is the chronology of everything that I came up with so far? And how do all these events tie together? Because one of the things that I learned in storytelling is a story is not just a number of events that follow each other randomly. No, there always has to be a reason why one thing leads to another. And so putting all these things in chronological order immediately showed me a few of the flaws in my story and also some of the things that I just didn't feel very excited about. And it's so funny. The moment you see what you already have, my brain started to just fill in the gaps. And so I made a lot of little notes in between the elements that I had already put in chronological order to flesh out the story or give a more logical sequence of events. So this was very, very helpful. Also showed me that actually there are large parts of the book that I haven't even begun to think about. For instance, this whole sequence of events during which Elara and Tim will learn how to use the magic. So the book of the tale of the Tome of Tales, the Codex Fabulae, is kept in this secret tower in a monastery. An idea that I had was, in fact, when you finally enter that tower, the inside is like the TARDIS. It is huge, even though the tower itself is relatively small. And so, what I need to still completely come up with is this whole training journey of Elara and Tim, and that can also be, I think, a wonderful way to match these two up and to develop their relationship, which I think will start in a very antagonistic way. They are rivals. And especially Alara kind of resents Tim for having an easy life because he's a guy and she doesn't have the same privileges. But over time, she starts to appreciate what he does and who he is. And likewise, Tim also starts to learn from Elara and is very grateful for everything that she teaches him. And so then you have this attack on the tower. The codex is stolen. That's where they meet Ethan. I also need to figure out how Ethan is going to form a bond of friendship. But I think that's not going to happen in the monastery because then it's time. Once the book is stolen, that's kind of the second call to action. They need to go after the book. And so it's during that journey, I think, that I'm going to tie the relationship of these three main characters. And so this next sequence is all going to be a long journey through Ireland, following clues or trying to find where the book is. And at the same time, they also see the consequences of of the fact that the book is no longer there, and so the things start to turn dark everywhere. They may also encounter several let's say, dark mages, infelics, who have already started to infiltrate and take position in towns and in control. So they also never know who to trust. Because these infelics always kind of disguise themselves, just as Ethan disguises himself as an angel of light, but he's dark. And so I think that can be a very exciting part of the book. Um, Still need to be fleshed out. And then they finally discover the monastery of the infelics. And that is where, and I totally forgot about this part of the story. Um, that place is actually a training ground. This is where the master, the true antagonist, is forming his army of servants, basically. And um, he makes them believe that it is out of ideology, but his true intentions are, of course, control, power. He wants to exploit the fear of people if they're robbed of hope in the stories, and use that to to put his strong leaders in place and to sell arms and I don't know what, just lots of evil. But the way in which he trains his army is by having them go through a whole bunch of tests. So it's kind of the opposite of the training that Tim and Ilara have received by the scribes, because that was a more of an academic type of formation. Here, it's all physical. It's like Hunger Games, they have these terrible, terrible tests that they have to do, and it's merciless. So if you fail, you become basically a slave. You lose all your privileges, all your rights. And so but that, of course, is something that they don't immediately see. The plan, and this is how I'm going to introduce Tim and Ilara into that part of the story, is Tim and Ilara are going to infiltrate. They are going to pretend that they want to actually join the Infelics. And so they too have to go through all these different tests. And Furtivus is going to be kind of their friend, their coach, their helper. And that is how these three get together. And Ethan is also involved in some way or another, but still have to figure out how. But the thing is, uh, Furtivus, even though he thinks that Ilara and Tim are his allies, also, for the first time in his life, experiences true friendship, because Tim and Ilara are nice people. And so uh, they grow and grow. They go through trial and trial. Tim constantly messes up and jeopardizes the entire plan. Ilara is always the one who saves the day and comes up with all sorts of smart ways to kind of play the system. And so ultimately, they get to the point where there's the final test, and it's something really gruesome and horrible, and Tim refuses, and he doesn't want to do it. And then Ilara is also conflicted, like what to do. And anyway, then there is some kind of resolution. Maybe Fortivus will help them get through that final phase without compromising, or without Tim and Ilara obviously compromising themselves. Or maybe Ilara at one point is just like doing something that she's not supposed to do. And she is gradually more and more like charmed, maybe even in love with Fortivus. And so she uses, and they learn actually to use dark powers. And so Ilara actually puts that into practice. And so they pass that final test, and then it's going to be horrible for Ilara, because again, Tim is allowed to enter and Ilara is put aside and she's discarded. And that's when she discovers what's truly going on, because then she ends up in the place where all the other failed students end up, and she is dismayed to see that the whole thing that she thought was empowering and alluring is all based on exploitation, on oppression. And that is finally when it clicks for her. She needs to stand up for herself. And so she is going to helm a revolution, a rebellion inside the monastery of the Infeliks. Tim, in the meantime, is trying to somehow figure out where the master is, and I don't know, just see if he can grab the power source or something like that. There's got to be some kind of secret thing that the master uses to manipulate everyone. So maybe, and or he's also, no, wait, of course, it's the codex. The codex is there, and the master is just sucking all the energy out of the codex, and that is making him stronger and stronger. And Tim obviously wants to take the codex back, but he's not up to the task. And then you have this final confrontation where the rebels, under the leadership of Ilara, are rising up and are starting to fight the other students, and the evil mages. And then, of course, you've got the big confrontation. It seems as if they've won, but then, of course, the master is there, and it seems to be completely for naught, because the master is so much more powerful than they could have ever thought. This was all part of his plan. It's kind of the emperor thing in Star Wars, obviously. And so that is when Tim almost dies, and Ilara is sacrificing her, or is willing to sacrifice herself to save the day. And ultimately, it's going to be Ethan who is going to save Ilara. And the moment that Ilara is going to basically die to save Tim, and also by that to redeem herself, that's when Ethan makes the sacrifice and merges, fuses with Ilara. She gets angelic powers, and she all of a sudden is able to save the day. And Ethan is now kind of like inhabiting her and working together with her. And then Furtivus, probably also kind of has his redemption arc, or the master betrays him. That's possible too. And so he joins them in the end. And then, of course, they bring back the codex to the monastery, and everything seems to be good and happy ending, but the master is still alive, and he's got a plan, and so that's going to be for the next book. So that's what I wrote down. That is the fruit of putting everything in the right order. I now know what the story is, more or less. There are lots of things that I want to improve, but I also see that there are tons of gaps in there that I still need to fill in with more story beats. But it feels like the construction stands. This is a good story. This is a story I would like to read. And so it's wonderful. I also did some work on making lists of all the characters that I came up with, the places, but that's for another update. So again, thank you so much for following me along. Hope you enjoy this. And if you'd like to be part of my street team, let me know. And we'll get together soon and form a team, and I have some plans for that as well. You'll hear that soon. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and God bless.